"You'll never amount to anything," said my in-laws. After they forced me to sign a prenup when I was broke, then my cheating wife lost everything to that same prenup after I built a successful company. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I never thought I'd be that guy posting his divorce revenge story on Reddit, but here we are. Got soda in hand and a story to tell that might help some of you avoid the bullshit I went through. Or maybe you'll just enjoy watching karma deliver a knockout punch to some entitled rich folks. Either way, buckle up. Some background. I grew up solidly working class. Dad fixed cars, mom taught elementary school. Nothing fancy, but they busted their asses to make sure I had opportunities they didn't. Got decent grades, landed a scholarship to state college for computer science. Lost my dad to a heart attack sophomore year, which fucked me up but also lit a fire under my ass to make something of myself. After college, bounced between coding jobs while building side projects that went nowhere. Dating life was your typical mid-20s disaster. Mostly girls who lost interest when they realized my Honda Civic wasn't just my everyday car. Then, I got this idea for construction management software that wouldn't make anyone's panties drop at parties, but solved real problems for an industry stuck in the technological Stone Age. So there I was, 28 years old, living off ramen and energy drinks, coding 16 hours a day in my buddy Tom's garage that we'd converted into the world's saddest startup headquarters. We had this app idea that was basically a project management tool for construction companies. Boring as hell, but solving a real problem. No VC funding, no fancy office, just 2 dudes, 3 monitors, and an AC unit that leaked all over our extension cords whenever the temperature went above 85. My car was this beat-up Civic with 180,000 miles that made us sound like a dying whale whenever I drove it over 60. My apartment had those thin walls where you could hear your neighbor taking a piss, brushing their teeth, or having an existential crisis at 3 a.m. But I was grinding every day, man. Putting in the hours when nobody was watching. That's what I believed separates the winners from the losers. What you do when nobody's clapping for you. Tom was always the social one. I was perfectly happy eating microwave burritos and coding until my eyeballs bled. But he'd drag me out occasionally saying shit like, "Dude, vitamin D is actually important," or "We need to network or we'll die alone in this garage." So when he mentioned this charity thing for local businesses, I went along with it. Not because I gave a shit about networking, but because he'd been putting up with my broke ass using his garage as an office for months. That's when I met Lisa, 27 female back then. She was working the registration table, all confident and polished, wearing this simple black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. First thing I noticed was she actually made eye contact when people talked, not doing that half-distracted phone-checking bullshit most people do. Second thing I noticed was she kept looking over at me while I awkwardly tried to balance a plastic cup and a paper plate of cheese cubes. Later, Tom clued me in that her family owned this chain of high-end furniture stores across 3 states. Not billionaire rich, but definitely vacation in Europe twice a year and have a boat named after their daughter, wealthy. The Prestons were basically local royalty. Their name was on half the buildings downtown, including the library and the east wing of the hospital. No clue why she was into me. Maybe she liked that I didn't know who her family was or give a shit. Maybe she was rebelling against daddy. Maybe the dating pool in our mid-sized town was just that shallow. Whatever it was, we clicked. She actually laughed at my terrible jokes and seemed genuinely interested in our boring-ass app. "So it's like project management, but specifically for construction?" she asked during our first real conversation. "Yeah, basically tracking materials, schedules, permits, all that boring shit that keeps buildings from collapsing or going 300% over budget," I explained, expecting her eyes to glaze over like most people's did. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully. "My dad's always complaining about contractors using outdated systems. He had this massive headache with our store renovation in Springfield because the contractor was literally using Excel spreadsheets from 2003. That was the moment, right there. A rich girl who could have been talking to anyone at this fancy charity mixer was genuinely interested in my pipe dream startup. In retrospect, maybe I fell for the oldest trick in the book. Someone actually listening to me talk about my passion. 6 months later, I'm shopping for a ring I could barely afford. And somehow, she said yes. I should have seen the red flags when she immediately called her parents before anyone else. Or when I met them for the first time, and her dad Bob shook my hand with this look like he was evaluating livestock at a county fair. Or when her mom Sue asked me, all casual like, "And what neighborhood did you grow up in?" Then barely concealed her horror when I mentioned the working class part of town where my dad fixed cars for a living. But the biggest flag I ignored was when Bob insisted on throwing us this massive engagement party at their lake house, even though I wanted something small. "It's not about what you want, son," Bob had said, clapping me on the shoulder with a grip that was just a bit too tight. "In this town, how you announce these things matters. The Prestons have a certain standard to maintain. Should have told him to shove his standard up his ass right then and there. But I was too busy being amazed that someone like Lisa would marry someone like me. Classic mistake. When you think you're playing out of your league, you'll put up with all kinds of bullshit just to stay in the game. The day of our engagement party started with Lisa's mom, Sue, taking her shopping for the perfect announcement outfit, while Bob invited me to come by the lake house early to have a man-to-man chat. I figured maybe he wanted to welcome me to the family, or give me some fatherly advice since my own dad had passed years ago. Shows what an idiot I was. I drove my wheezing Civic up their winding driveway past manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain monthly than I made in a year. The lake house was this massive timber and stone mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. Bob met me at the door in a golf shirt that definitely cost hundreds, looking like he'd just stepped out of a rich white guy's monthly photo shoot. "Right on time, I like that," he said, leading me into his office. But we weren't alone. There was this dude in a suit sitting there with a stack of papers spread across Bob's desk. "Tyler, this is our family attorney." Bob closed the door behind me with a soft click that felt oddly final. I was a bit scared around these loaded people, not gonna lie. "We need to discuss some paperwork before tonight's announcement," he said. I stood there in my jeans and a halfway decent button-up I'd bought specifically for this party, while Bob explained the situation to me. "Listen, son, nothing personal, but you're bringing absolutely zero to this marriage except student debt and a pipe dream. This agreement protects what's ours. The family legacy." His lawyer nodded along, pushing the papers toward an empty chair, clearly meant for me. "It's quite standard in situations with significant asset disparities." I sat down slowly, feeling like I'd been ambushed. "What kind of agreement are we talking about?" "Prenuptial," Bob said, like he was discussing the weather. "Outlines what happens to assets in case of divorce. Basically states that what's ours stays ours. What's Lisa's stays Lisa's." I started flipping through the document. It was 20-something pages of legal jargon. "I'd like to read this properly. Maybe have someone look it over for me," I said. Bob laughed like I'd told a joke. "We're announcing your engagement in 3 hours. Either we announce with this signed, or we'll need to reconsider the engagement announcement." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, but didn't contradict his client. "You're asking me to sign a complex legal document I haven't read?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "Should I also promise my firstborn and hand over my passwords while I'm at it?" Although I sounded petty and poor. "I'm asking you to acknowledge reality," Bob replied, his fake friendly tone dropping for the first time. "You're marrying into a family with significant assets. We didn't build all this to have half of it walk out the door because you and Lisa can't make it work." Sue walked in then with this fake-ass smile, touching my shoulder like we were old friends. "It's just standard for our family, dear. All the spouses sign one. Barbara with Michael, Todd with Jenny, and now you with Lisa. Did you give them 3 hours to review it too?" I asked. Sue's smile tightened. They understood what was at stake. I asked if I could at least take it to another room, read it without them staring at me. Bob reluctantly agreed, and I spent the next hour trying to decipher legal language in their guest bedroom. The agreement was brutal. Everything they owned stayed theirs. Everything their daughter would inherit stayed hers. And anything we built during marriage would be split according to contribution, which basically meant whoever paid for it owned it. And what was mine, LOL, stays mine. There was a clause about infidelity that seemed pretty standard. Cheating meant you lost rights to certain marital assets. I barely paid attention to it, since I had no intention of cheating. When I came back to the office, I asked if Lisa knew about this. "Of course," Bob said smoothly. "It's for her protection." I sat there looking at the pen they'd laid out for me, thinking about Lisa, about the life I thought we were going to build, about how shitty it would feel to cancel an engagement party because I wouldn't sign. "If you're planning to be married forever, this document is meaningless anyway," Sue added with that same tight smile. So I signed it. Like a freaking idiot. I signed it. That night at the party, Bob made this big speech about welcoming me to the family. "Tyler represents the values we hold dear: hard work, determination, and a commitment to excellence," he announced to a room full of people who made more in interest payments than I made all year. The whole time, That prenup sat in his safe, my signature still drying on the page. When I finally told Lisa about it later that night, she just shrugged and said her parents made all her boyfriends sign NDAs just to date her, so this was normal for them. Don't worry about it, she said. It's just how they protect the family business. It doesn't mean anything for us. Your dad basically said I was marrying you for money, I told her. Daddy's just protective, she replied. He'll come around once he sees how amazing you are. He did not, in fact, come around. First few years of marriage were pretty good, all things considered. We moved into this house her parents helped us buy. Translation, they bought it and put it mostly in Lisa's name with me on a tiny percentage for tax purposes. I kept working on my app while taking side coding gigs to pay my half of the bills. I wasn't focused on property percentages. I was locked in, I mean obsessed. While Lisa was binging Real Housewives and planning brunches, I was buried in code like a madman. The app wasn't just a side hustle anymore, it became my oxygen. I was living off caffeine, power naps, and this belief that I was building something real, something no one could take credit for but me. Lisa insisted that we split everything 50-50 despite her family money, which I actually respected. Said she wanted us to build something together, not just live off her parents. I didn't even argue about it. I was too busy trying to prove myself. Every morning I was up at 5 a.m., coding before my real work started at 9. Every weekend while Lisa was brunching with her friends, I was hunched over my laptop fixing bugs and adding features. No days off, no vacations, no breaks. When you got nothing to fall back on, you don't get the luxury of quitting. Lisa worked at her family's corporate office, handling their marketing. She wasn't spoiled like I expected. She worked hard, had actual skills. We were partners, or so I thought. The Preston family dinners were a special kind of torture, though. Every Sunday, we'd head over to the main family residence for this formal dinner, where Bob would hold court like some feudal lord, asking me pointed questions about my little app and whether I'd considered a real job with the family business. Sue would just smile while occasionally dropping gems like, "Not everyone is meant for entrepreneurship, dear." If I had $1 for every time someone at that table said, "You know, furniture retail is actually a growth industry if you understand the market segments," I could have funded my startup myself. In year 3, everything changed. The app finally took off after this huge commercial developer started using it and told others. Suddenly, we had actual paying customers, then bigger clients, then investors calling. Tom and I had to hire people, get a real office, the whole deal. I remember the day our first big enterprise client signed, a national construction company with projects in 38 states. I came home ready to celebrate, and Lisa was there with news of her own. She was pregnant, with twins. It felt like everything was finally clicking into place. My business was taking off, we were starting a family, and even Bob had to acknowledge that my pipe dream was turning into something real. He actually clapped me on the back at the next family dinner and said, "Well, maybe there's more to app development than I thought." High praise from His Royal Highness. Ben and Kev were born, and man, those first months were insane. Lisa's parents hired us this nanny. I'll call her Anna, who was a freaking lifesaver. I was splitting time between the exploding business and trying to be there for my boys. We moved to a bigger house in a better neighborhood. This time I actually contributed to the down payment, though Lisa's family helped again, making sure the house was mostly in her name. Meanwhile, her family's furniture chain was struggling. Online retailers were eating their lunch, and Bob refused to adapt. People want to feel the quality before they buy furniture, he'd insist at family dinners. You can't replicate that experience online. I offered to help them build an online presence, maybe an AR app where customers could see how furniture would look in their homes. Bob just waved me off. We've been successful for 3 generations without internet gimmicks. I just sat there, biting my tongue. What was I supposed to say? Congrats on proudly ignoring 2 decades of progress? The truth is, the only thing older than their furniture was their thinking. But hey, far be it from me to interrupt the downfall of a legacy built on oak and arrogance. By year 5, the app was being used by Fortune 500 companies. We had 43 employees, and I'd gone from broke coder to CEO of a legit company. We were getting acquisition offers, but I wasn't ready to sell. I was building something that mattered. But things at home were getting weird. I noticed Lisa started taking tennis lessons 3 times a week and joined this fancy health club with women-only events that always seemed to run late. She was posting on Instagram from places that definitely weren't our town when she was supposed to be with the kids. Anna, our nanny, would send me pictures of the boys at their preschool play, while Lisa's stories showed her at some resort pool. I was busy as hell, but not stupid. Something wasn't adding up. I started noticing other changes too. Lisa bought a new car. Nothing crazy, just a BMW X5 that cost more than all the vehicles I'd owned in my life combined. When I asked about it, she said it was safer for the boys than her old Mercedes. She redecorated our living room with furniture that definitely wasn't from her family's stores. New clothes, new jewelry, new girls' trips to spas and wineries. All while I was working 60-hour weeks growing the business, being there for my sons as much as possible, and trying to be a good husband to a wife who was increasingly absent. I wasn't about to turn into some paranoid husband stalking his wife's location or digging through her phone like I was 12. That's not who I am. But I'm not blind either. The tennis lessons that always lined up with Anna taking the boys out, the late-night women-only networking events, the conveniently timed marketing retreats, it all felt off. But I kept quiet, because I don't move without certainty. You don't debug a system by guessing. You collect data, you wait, and then you strike when there's no room for denial. So I stayed patient, watching it stack up. The moment I knew for sure wasn't some dramatic discovery of text or lipstick on a collar. It was at dinner with my boys, now 4 years old. I was trying to get them to eat something besides dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets. A losing battle, let me tell you. Ben said something that stopped me cold. "Daddy, why don't you give hugs like mommy's friend Max? He picks mommy all the way up." I kept cutting nuggets into smaller pieces, trying to keep my voice casual to keep him going. "Who's Max, buddy?" Kev nodded enthusiastically. "Max has big muscles and a funny voice. He comes over when you're at work and Anna takes us for ice cream." "Ice cream, huh?" I managed, feeling like I'd been slapped. "Does Max come over a lot?" Ben shrugged in that way only preschoolers can. "Sometimes. Mommy says he's her special tennis coach. He has yellow hair," Kev added helpfully. "And tattoos like a pirate." I kept asking questions, keeping my tone light while something cold and hard formed in my chest. Turns out Max was supposedly Lisa's tennis coach who sometimes came to help mommy with exercises at our house. My 4-year-old sons had accidentally exposed everything. That night, I went into my home office and checked our security system logs. When we'd moved into the bigger house, I'd installed this smart home system with cameras that recorded when doors opened, mostly because I was paranoid about the boys getting out or someone breaking in. I never thought I'd be using it to catch my wife. Sure enough, on days I had late meetings, there was Lisa letting in some muscular blonde dude when Anna took the kids out. The timestamps matched perfectly with when Anna would text me pictures of the boys getting ice cream or at the park. No PI needed. My own security system, and my kids gave me all the evidence. I wasn't even that surprised. We'd been living separate lives, me building my company, her doing whatever the hell she wanted with the family money. But bringing this guy around my kids? In our home? That crossed a line. I sat there in my home office at 2 a.m., scrolling through months of camera footage, watching this stranger enter my house while I was out busting my ass to build something real. All those nights I thought she was too tired for me because of the kids or work. Nah, she was just saving her energy for Tennis Boy. I did some digging. Not hard to find a tennis instructor named Max in our area. Turns out Coach Max worked at the country club, giving private lessons to bored rich housewives. His Instagram was full of shirtless photos, showing off his tattoos and quotes about finding your strength and other motivational bullshit. Dude looked exactly like what you'd expect. Blonde Ken doll with tribal tattoos and the kind of carefully cultivated stubble that takes more maintenance than a clean shave. Part of me, the version that still remembers what it felt like to count change for gas, wanted to kick in the door, drag Lisa and her discount tennis instructor out by their matching hair extensions, and give the neighborhood a show. But the man I've become, the one sitting at the helm of a growing company with employees, investors, and real skin in the game, he decided to keep it classy. No shouting, no scenes, just quiet moves and airtight receipts. So I waited a couple days, got my ducks in a row, called my lawyer, not some family friend, but someone I'd hired for my business. Had him look at that prenup I'd signed years ago, asked about my options quietly, made copies of the security footage, started documenting everything. Then I confronted Lisa after the boys went to bed. Didn't make accusations. Just said, "Tell me about Max, the tennis coach." The look on her face, first shock, then this weird relief, like she was glad to stop pretending. But she didn't apologize. Instead, she literally laughed. "What are you going to do about it?" she said, pouring herself a glass of wine. "My family owns everything. Your name isn't on the house, the cars, nothing. You're just the help who happens to sleep here." I stayed calm, which seemed to piss her off more. "The boys told me about your friend, about how you bring him here when I'm working, and they're out with Anna." "So what?" she snapped, downing half her wine in one go. "You're never here. Always at your precious company. Max is obsessed with me. Does he pay attention to you at the Sandstone Resort too? Because that's where you checked in last month when you were supposedly at your mom's book club. Her face went white. I showed her my phone with screenshots of her Instagram stories, geotags and all, plus calendar screenshots showing the boys' school play scheduled the same day. You've been tracking me? She sputtered. Didn't need to. You posted your affair on social media, Lisa. Not exactly detective work. Though our home security system has some interesting footage too. Then came the threats. How her family would destroy me. How she'd take the boys. How I'd lose everything in divorce because of that prenup. I just nodded and said we'd let the lawyers sort it out. What? You think your little app makes you untouchable? She sneered. Daddy will hire the best lawyers in the state. You signed a prenup, remember? I smiled for the first time that night. Oh, I remember. I definitely remember that prenup. She had no idea what was coming. And the thing is, I didn't take revenge. She trapped herself on her own. What Lisa didn't know was that I'd already gone through that prenup with a fine-tooth comb. I mentioned before that the document her daddy forced me to sign had a mutual infidelity clause. If either party cheated, and it could be proven, they forfeited rights to a significant portion of marital assets. At the time, it seemed like another way to screw me if I ever stepped out of line. Never occurred to them that their princess would be the one getting caught with her pants down. I didn't tell Lisa any of this, though. Better to let her and her family think they had all the power. People make mistakes when they're overconfident. 3 days later, I got this text from Bob. Family meeting. Our house. 7 p.m. tonight. No lawyers. I knew exactly what was coming, but decided to go anyway. Might as well hear their bullshit firsthand. I showed up to find Bob, Sue, and Lisa sitting in their fancy living room like some kind of tribunal. Bob was in his leather chair, looking all stern and important. Sue had that fake concerned look rich people get when they're about to screw you. Lisa just looked pissed. We want to discuss this situation like adults, Bob started, all condescending. Family matters should stay within the family. We're not family anymore, I said calmly. Not since your daughter decided to bang her tennis coach in our house while my kids were getting ice cream. Sue gasped like I'd slapped her. There's no need for that kind of language. There's also no need to cheat on your husband. But here we are, I replied. Bob cleared his throat. Marriages hit rough patches. Lisa made a mistake, but after 5 years together, surely there's a path forward that doesn't involve lawyers and public embarrassment. I almost laughed. Of course, their main concern would be how it looked to their country club friends. People make mistakes, Sue added, reaching over to pat Lisa's hand. Marriage is about forgiveness. I've already retained counsel, I said simply. Bob's face hardened. That seems premature. After exchanging glances with Sue, he leaned forward. Let's put our cards on the table. The prenuptial agreement was designed to protect Lisa and our family assets. It was appropriate when I had nothing, I finished for him. When your financial circumstances were different, he corrected smoothly. When there was a significant imbalance. But the situation has evolved, Sue continued. The prenup was intended to protect Lisa in case you left her with nothing. But now, you're a successful entrepreneur. Worth what? 15, 20 million on paper? Lisa has given you her youth, her support, her connections. She's made sacrifices. When I didn't respond, Sue pushed harder. She's the mother of your children. Support? I repeated, looking at Lisa, who couldn't meet my eyes. Is that what we're calling hooking up with your tennis coach now? Bob's jaw tightened. We're not here to litigate past mistakes. We're looking toward an equitable resolution. The prenup is the resolution, I replied. The one you insisted on. You should have spent less time lawyering up and more time thinking about your daughter's real hobbies. That document is outdated and morally unbalanced, Sue declared, practically spitting. It would be unconscionable to enforce it now. Unconscionable? You didn't find it unconscionable when it protected your daughter. Only now that it might protect me? You've forgotten your place, Bob said, his fake politeness finally cracking. No one expected you to actually succeed on this scale. This was supposed to be a safety net for our daughter, not a weapon for you to use against our family. There it was. The truth behind 5 years of fake smiles at Thanksgiving. They never saw me as an equal, just a temporary phase safely contained by legal boundaries. So what exactly are you asking? I asked, though I already knew. We want you to voluntarily set aside the prenup, Bob stated. Negotiate a fair settlement acknowledging Lisa's contributions to your success. Contributions? I asked. Like what? Lisa finally spoke. I was there from the beginning. I believed in you when no one else did. You were physically present, I corrected. When you weren't traveling or screwing your tennis coach, did you ever test the app, offer feedback, understand what I was building, or just enjoy the lifestyle it provided? She had no answer. I've been on calls at 3 a.m. with developers in India. I've missed vacations to fix server issues. I've skipped dinners to close deals. Where were you for any of that? I looked at each of them. The agreement stands. Lisa receives exactly what the prenup specifies. And FYI, that prenup has a fidelity clause. Cheating voids any claims to marital assets. I have video of Max entering our house 26 times in the last 3 months. I have text messages. I have location data. The stunned silence as I walked out felt better than any comeback I could have dropped. What came next was all business. The divorce was fast and brutal. Turned out that prenup her daddy made me sign had this little section about infidelity that nobody thought would ever apply to his precious daughter. If either party cheated, they forfeited any claims to marital assets they didn't directly purchase or inherit. Their hotshot lawyer tried everything to invalidate it, called me coerced, said the terms were unconscionable. The judge wasn't buying it, especially after seeing the evidence of Max, the metadata-tagged photos, and hearing statements from Anna about the tennis lessons. I'll never forget the day in court when Lisa's attorney, this Brooks Brothers poster boy named Jeffrey, tried to argue that I had trapped Lisa by weaponizing the prenup. Your Honor, Mr. Preston had his daughter sign this agreement under duress, Jeffrey argued. He never expected it would be used against her. My lawyer, Sarah, this absolute shark I'd hired based on her reputation for handling tech industry divorces, just smiled. To be clear, Your Honor, Mr. Preston wrote this agreement, not my client. He insisted on its execution 3 hours before an engagement party. Now he's claiming inequity because the clause he inserted is being enforced exactly as written? The irony is remarkable. The judge, this older woman who'd clearly seen it all, just peered over her glasses at Lisa's family. So your argument is that the agreement is unfair because it's being applied to your daughter rather than to her husband? Jeffrey sputtered something about changed circumstances and unconscionable enforcement. The judge was having none of it. The infidelity clause is mutual, applies equally to both parties, and was inserted by the party now objecting to its enforcement. Motion to invalidate denied. Lisa's side looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under them, which ironically was probably one of the overpriced items they used to sell. Bob just sat there like a man who'd spent his life believing he controlled every outcome and couldn't process the fact that this one slipped through his fingers. Their lawyer tried to salvage what he could, but the damage was done. They thought they'd cornered me years ago with that prenup. Turns out, they handed me the exact weapon they'd always feared. And I got full custody because Lisa couldn't show stable housing or income after everything went down. She gets supervised visits twice a month that she sometimes bothers to show up for. But the real bomb dropped outside our divorce case. Their furniture business was collapsing. Years of refusing to modernize had finally caught up with them. They'd taken out massive loans using their properties as collateral to keep afloat. When 3 major suppliers demanded payment and they couldn't make it, everything unraveled. I heard about it from Tom first. Dude, did you see what happened to Preston Furnishings? They just laid off like 60 people from their corporate office. I started paying attention to the business news. Turned out Bob had been hiding the company's financial problems for years. Online retailers had been eating away at their market share, but instead of adapting, he doubled down on the high-touch luxury experience that fewer and fewer people wanted. They'd opened expensive new showrooms in upscale areas just as foot traffic to retail was plummeting. The prenup meant I kept my now successful company while Lisa got exactly what she brought to the marriage: family connections to a failing business. She went from posting about luxury resorts to moving back in with mommy and daddy just as their empire was crumbling. But here's where karma really came knocking. When their family business declared bankruptcy, there was an asset auction. Guess who had the capital and the spite to buy their remaining inventory, their warehouse, and their brand name? That's right, me. I didn't even want to be in the furniture business. But the look on Bob's face when he realized I now owned the company his grandfather had started? Worth every penny. I was there at the auction, sitting in the back. Not hiding exactly, but not drawing attention either. The auctioneer was going through the lots. Inventory, buildings, IP, brand names. Most of the bidders were other furniture companies looking to pick up assets cheap. When they got to the Preston Furnishings brand name and trademarks, I raised my paddle. Bob was at the front of the room, looking like he'd aged 10 years and 6 months. When he turned and saw me bidding on his family legacy, I thought he might have a stroke right there. I didn't get everything, didn't want everything, but I got enough. The brand name, the customer lists, their flagship showroom downtown. The final twist of the knife came 3 months later. The bank foreclosed on their lake house, the same place where they'd cornered me into signing that prenup years ago. I bought it at auction too, turned it into a weekend place for me and my boys. The first weekend we stayed there, Ben looked around at the massive living room and asked, "Isn't this Grandpa's house?" It's our house now, buddy, I told him. Sometimes things change in ways we don't expect. And they did. Lisa calls me crying once a month, blaming her parents. They made me sign that stupid prenup with that clause about cheating. They said no man would ever build anything worthwhile marrying me. They ruined everything. The thing is, she's not entirely wrong. Her parents did set her up for failure, just not in the way she thinks. They raised her to believe she was untouchable, that rules were for other people, that money could fix any problem. When our marriage hit the inevitable rough patches that all marriages hit, instead of working on it, she found validation elsewhere because that's what she'd been taught to do. Take the easy path. Meanwhile, my sons and I live in what used to be their showcase home. Ben and Kev are in therapy. Turns out watching your mom's affair and your grandparents' public financial meltdown isn't great for kids. But they're resilient little dudes. Anna stayed with us through everything. She still takes the boys for ice cream, only now it's a reward for good behavior. Not because their mom's tennis coach is coming over. They see Lisa twice a month during supervised visits that she shows up for about half the time. Last I heard, Max, the tennis instructor, is working at a resort in Miami, probably coaching some other rich housewife. The company's doing better than ever. We expanded into adjacent construction software products, went international, and last year got acquired by a major enterprise software company. I stayed on as CEO of our division with a sweet compensation package and enough money to never worry about prenups again. I eventually sold the furniture business to a competitor who actually knew what they were doing. Keeping it would have just been petty, and I didn't have time for that. The boys and I redecorated the lake house, got rid of all that stuffy formal furniture and replaced it with stuff we can actually put our feet on. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the dock at what used to be their lake house, watching my boys fish, I think about that day I signed the prenup. I was so intimidated by their money, their status, their family legacy, that I let them back me into a corner. I signed a document I barely understood because I was afraid of losing a woman who ended up betraying me anyway. Lisa and her family thought they were so smart with their prenup, their fancy lawyer, their "you're just a nobody" attitude. But karma comes for everyone eventually. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Never let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve your success. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time.